Welcome to our Boardroom Bites at 9 this morning. Today we're talking about hijackers on board and how one courageous whistleblower fought against the capture of SAA. And today we have, I think, a well-known name, Cynthia Stimpel, with us. She's a whistleblower who stood up against a corrupt deal at SAA and saved taxpayers some millions of money. Cynthia's recently launched her book, Hijackers on Board, which shares her personal story around the state capture and how she's managed that. And this morning, she's going to share with us her experience, what she's gone through. So I'm really looking forward to it. Please do, ask us some questions later on. And Cynthia, I'm going to hand over to you, and I will see everyone later on in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Vikeshni, and welcome everyone. Thank you for having me on this morning. And thank you for coming to listen to my story, which I have titled Hijackers on Board for you to see. Thank you so much. So to start my story is, what was my background? I'm sure you're all asking, and how did it come to be that I eventually ended up writing the story called Hijackers on Board? So I come from a background which I'm sure we all would have with our family-based values. I come from a large family of 9 children. We were 10 initially, but one died within a month. So a large family of 10. Grew up in a small suburb, Bosmont, in the West Rand in Johannesburg, in South Africa. And there, my parents were very strict, and I'm sure you all experienced that. There was a keen discipline in the way we conducted ourselves with our schooling, with our homework, with whatever we did. If we played too late, our parents called us in. You're not supposed to be at someone's house for too long. You needed to be home. Homework was strictly monitored. And if we did anything out of line, our parents immediately, we would be meted out some sort of punishment. Not hectic that you were slapped or hit, but something that determined that you need to follow the strict line. And so today I am married. My husband is Michael. I have 2 children, Nicole and Jacqueline. They are both beautiful young ladies, very independent in their own right. My eldest daughter, Nicole, is a pediatrician, has 2 children, Noah and Emma. So I'm also a grandmom. And I love them dearly and spend as much time as I can with them. And that was basically where I'm at the moment as Cynthia. What was my background in studying and growing up? We grew up in our neighborhood, played with our neighbors, schooled at the local school in my primary school years and my early high school years. And then my father sent us to a boarding school called Little Flower School, which was out in Natal. And then came back home, which is Johannesburg and still my home, and to study there. I couldn't get into university at the time. I had quite a good matric pass compared relative to those days. And I had to apply for ministerial consent to study medicine. And when I did that, I didn't get the consent. And so my dad said to me, you know what, the banks, go and work in the bank and see how you could study through them, which I did. And I ended up working in the bank. The bulk of my career is in banking. The last 10 years was at SAA. And through the banking, I'd learned and studied further through the Institute of Bankers, as well as taken on additional studies through risk management and the final sort of through Wits University took a few additional studies there. Going from there, I worked primarily in major banks. So started off with the old Barclays Bank before they disinvested in 1987, went to work for Citibank then. And then during 1987, both Citibank as well as Barclays disinvested, which formed the current First National Bank that we see today. And I stayed with them. And from there, I went to work with Development Bank of Southern Africa, spent about almost 5 years with them. And from there was the SAA stint. How did I get to where I am with SAA. So SAA basically needed people with banking experience, because if any of you know the history of SAA, is that it fell under the Transnet fold, and Transnet as a whole was a state-owned organization, together with reporting lines to the Department of Public Enterprises. And then Transnet was going to break away from SAA, and hence SAA needed people who could run its treasury. And that's how I applied for the position and ended up at SAA. In SAA, my role was primarily that I focus on financial risk issues for South African Airways, looking at all areas that was applicable to the financial risk. And so there was the foreign currency risk, based on the fact that SAA flew to all countries and would incur currency expenditure, for instance, like buying fuel or the tickets that are sold, the income would be in the foreign currency. So in the States, it would be the US dollars. If it were, SAA flew to India, it would be the Indian rupees. If it went to Brazil, it was the Brazilian reals. So there was that management of the foreign currency. At the same time, the purchase of fuel was also in currency, in dollars, and it was managing of currency risk. SAA also then did hedging, as you're well aware of. While they were at Transnet, they were focused in hedging then already. And when I came on board, we were looking at hedging fuel risk, jet fuel risk, as well as the currency. And that primarily, in summary, was my responsibility. I worked there roughly for 8 years. And in that position, I also deputized for the then or various group treasurers that were there. So when they went on leave, I acted as the deputy. When they resigned, I took on the deputy treasurer role for roughly 6 months until the new treasurer was hired, and then I would go back to my role as financial risk manager. And that was an ongoing effect where we were. That brought then to the fact that we needed funding as SAA. From the day that I started in 2006, December 2006, into that early period of March 2007, SAA was then in the process of taking its first loan and its first government guarantee. Now, bear in mind that Transnet had all the government guarantees at the time from government and the National Treasury. And when they broke away, becoming their own Schedule 2 organization, SAA broke away with a very weak balance sheet, with very little assets on its balance sheet, and only loan-based liabilities. So it was a very skewed balance sheet from day one. During my time there, being in the financial risk management side on Treasury, working together with your accounting division, the finance accounting division, and internal and external auditors, we always recommended that SAA starts taking in true equity and beef up that balance sheet, because it was too skewed on the debt equity side of it. My role then changed when I was acting as group treasurer in 2015. Our group treasurer had resigned. His name was Pitolo Ramasubudi. He came from AXA at the time and worked for a couple of years at SAA. And I also deputized when he went on leave, and when he resigned, I had then acted in that position. And we had been borrowing funds. So from 2007, when SAA first borrowed funds, the first borrowing was 1.3 billion on the back of a government guarantee. That guarantee came from National Treasury. And here on, as you can all well remember, that SAA was always in the public space, in the media, where everybody said that SAA is really taking a strain on the fiscus by constantly borrowing. and which they did. Unfortunately, that was the position that SAA was in.
Cynthia, we've lost you. You're still showing on my side as online, but your video is frozen and we're not getting any sound. So if everyone can just bear with us for a second. Okay, she's coming back on again. You're on mute, Cynthia.
Thank you. SAA's borrowing continued from 2007 into each year, where they were borrowing short term, 1 billion here for 1 year, 1.5 billion for another year, 2 billion for maybe 1.5 years or 2 years. There was this constant borrowing. So by the time I took over in 2015 as group treasurer, we weren't in a good space. We had already borrowed up to 11 billion rand and the back of 14 billion government guarantees. So there was still leeway for another borrowing of 3 billion. And we were in a situation where we were all tasked to save the organization funds. My recommendation then, through a borrowing plan, which we submitted to board, obviously going through the checks and balances of various other groups like the EXCO, like the financial risk management team, and consulting with National Treasury at the time, was to consolidate our debt and to consolidate it so that and extend the period, because we were always rolling over debt on an annual basis. And rather than have this constant rolling over of debt, of borrowing in piecemeal bits, was to consolidate the debt, get the advantage of a better interest rate and a longer term, so SAA could have some breathing space in managing their debt. The other advantage would have been that by negotiating it, SAA could reduce the interest rate, because our interest rate paid per annum was already about 1.2 billion at the time. We thought that when we recommended that to board was happy, National Treasury was equally happy, and this was approved at board level in 2015 during April with their board meeting. Come, however, when we started the process to put it in place, was we had requested from board, could we then consolidate the debt? Can we put it out to the market? And how would we go up and let's get the ball rolling to see if there was appetite for a full 15 billion loan. We rounded it up to 15 billion because our borrowing at the time was roughly 14 odd billion. Our board then, when we put the proposal through to them, they requested that we change, that they wanted to be part of the RFP process. And they wanted to be part of giving suppliers to this, the whole request for proposal we were going to put forward for funding. And this alarmed me. That was my first inkling where the alarm bells rang. And I thought, this is not how it should be working. And I went then to my then boss, who was the CFO. His name was Wolf Meyer. And I said to him, look, I'm very uncomfortable with this. How can I, how do we go about this now? Because board should not be involved. Board has oversight. They should not at all be requesting to be part of the request for proposal spec, and neither should they be involved in actually supplying clients. He was equally uncomfortable, and he said he's getting pushback at board. He's constantly arguing with them at the time, and that he said they are constantly interfering. And that's when he first said to our team that he was looking to resign. And I'd like to pause there with a question before I go into depth, in depth of how we go about it, and perhaps use our poll here. What would you do, if I can hand over to Vikeshni, just to put our poll here and to ask how would you act if you were a board member? And
So our poll on directed duties should be showing on your screens. I'm going to give it a few seconds just to allow everyone to participate. Just a few more people are filling it in. Okay, it looks like I think most have come in, and the answers are all the same. So I'm going to share the results, Cynthia. You can see it on your side as well. Basically, a majority of members have said yes.
Wonderful. So I want you to bear that in mind. As a board director, what are your fiduciary duties? And this is what I challenge, that board should have oversight. They should not be involved in literally operation issues. My then boss, Wolf, said to me, look, we need to get this RFP out. So prepare it, let's prepare it and submit it to board for the approval. And his understanding was that, you know what, they will not meet the criteria because they are not credit rated. They probably don't have the capacity, and probably no one would even respond. We sent it out. We sent it to our board, who then looked at our RFP. They were agreed with it, happy. That's the RFP we sent out in September. We gave our normal 3 weeks of response to our suppliers, and our suppliers primarily are banking. The 5 major banks, it went to them, and there were some names that were given to us, which we had submitted, small clients, which we didn't know. In the meantime, we did our own background research. When the respondents came back and we did our final analysis of the actual respondents' term sheets, we found there was a client that came out tops. They were prepared to submit, give SAA, their respondent said, 15 billion. So they were okay with 15 billion over a 10-year period at an interest rate of 5.8%. And on top of that, they were prepared to give SAA a 5-year grace period. And for those of you who work in finance would know, where there's a grace period, it means that you don't repay capital and interest. It allows you to build up your interest base. And then the next 5 years, we were going to repay capital plus interest. When we calculated that, it was far too good to be true. And we thought, this looks highly suspect. We need to investigate. We took the deal, from my side, we took the deal directly to our legal department, and I asked them, please, can you do full due diligence on this client? They've come out tops in our ratings. There were 2 banks, roughly 3 banks that responded, but none of the banks wanted to give a full 15 billion. They were going to give pro rata of the amount over a longer period. They were looking at 3 years to 5 years. But only this client came up with this 10-year period, and the other clients didn't even make it. They didn't get through on the whole criteria basis. So our legal department went to do the due diligence. And with the due diligence, they found that the client Seacrest, who had the highest, the best bid at the time, was going to get a funder to fund the full 15 billion. And the funder was called Grisag, and they based in the Free State. When they tried to do the due diligence with Grisag, it failed completely. They couldn't get the information, they couldn't get balance sheets, they couldn't get director information. And they wrote up a report, which they submitted to myself, to EXCO, and the Financial Risk Committee, and we felt very uncomfortable that we couldn't recommend this. So we made our board recommendation saying that these clients came up tops, this particular client, but we had done our due diligence and we felt we couldn't recommend this client. Then we, as an alternative, we said we will recommend the banks, even though they haven't provided the full 15 billion for SAA. The total amount was roughly 4.5 billion. We would accept the 4.5 billion and then go out on a new RFP for the balance. And then we wrote further saying that the other clients didn't make it. What our board did then was they gave a board resolution to us and expected us to act on this board resolution. The board resolution was stated that they agree with us that we don't take Seacrest, but they do not agree with our recommendation to take the banks because the banks weren't giving the full quantum of 15 billion. They were only giving a portion of it. And they therefore recommended that the CEO and the CFO negotiate the agreement directly with Free State Development Corporate and that they fund SAA with the full 15 billion. I was unaware of it at the time of the board resolution, and I was called in by the acting CFO then, Pumezana Hansi, because by then, Wolf Meyer had resigned and Pumezana Hansi had come in and acted as interim chief financial officer. Her meeting with me was to ratify the board resolution. And I said, how can I ratify this when it wasn't even part of the RFP process? I don't even know this client. It didn't even come through the whole procurement process for sourcing of funds. And I'm not prepared to do it. And then she told me she was instructing me to do it and that I should do it. And I said, well, first, let me get the board resolution. By the time I got back to my desk, there was an email from her stating to me, please, I would like that ratification by this afternoon. So I wrote back and I said, well, I cannot ratify this because I wasn't privy to the meeting and neither do I know the background of this client. Please, can you provide me with a board resolution? And then I will take it up with the risk committee. That was Monday, the 7th of December at the time. I only got it the following day, the board resolution. And when I received this board resolution, it stated the FTC through a letter being circulated at board. So that for me was even worse because a letter came to board and I felt that board didn't even apply their minds. So as directors, what is our role? We need to look at all information so that we are able to make an informed decision when you're applying your minds at board discussion. And hence the reason I put that poll right up front. What would you do when you suddenly just given a letter and you have to then say, okay, I go with this letter, without knowing that your management, your operational team, who should have done all the checks and balances, and they haven't done it, and here you're making decision. Obviously, you're putting your own personal career at risk. Nevertheless, though, our board made this decision on the basis of a letter that was circulated at board. When I saw this, I then wrote a formal email to all the risk management heads. Our risk management team was made up of the head of legal, the head of enterprise-wide risk, the head of treasury, which was me, the head of financial accounting, and the head of the chief risk officer as well. So there was risk, legal, accounting, and enterprise-wide risk and treasury involved in this meeting. And I sent them the board resolution. I told them I'm very uncomfortable with this. I feel that we should really now make a decision on how we're going to go forward. The recommendation I made was that we scrap the current process. We go out and do a complete new RFP, and so that we start clean. The rest of the team suggested, well, look, we've already gone in an RFP. It would damage our reputation as SAA if we do another RFP because we were going mainly to the banks, and therefore we should rather send it to this new client FTC, hold back the analysis. Once we get back the information from FTC, we then do a full comparison and analysis again, and then make a further recommendation to board. The majority voted on that, and that was the process we followed. So we sent it out. We sent out the RFP to FTC. We gave them 2 weeks to respond. They responded. This was just before Christmas now, bearing in mind we're in December already of 2015. Come January, early January, we then analyzed it as a team. We had we call it a cross-functional sourcing team, because that is based in our policies, that you get together, not one person makes the decision, a team of people make the decision. Look at all the data, you do your spec analysis, and then you go through your criteria and you shortlist your clients. We looked at FTC's proposal, their term sheet, and strange for me, what stood out was that FTC's proposal was exactly based on Seacrest's proposal. They also came up with a 10-year term. They could finance SAA for a full 15 billion. They would give SAA 5-year grace period, and they would, their rate was better. The interest rate was 4%, and that they would also, so that was in a nutshell. We looked further, and we said, okay, so who is their funder? Their funder was also GRISAC. So here was Seacrest, which we rejected because they didn't pass the due diligence, Seacrest together with GRISAC. And suddenly here was FTC willing to fund SAA, also using GRISAC, and the board has given approval for it already. So we wrote up our recommendations, and we went back to the CEO, the acting CFO, sorry, at the time, Phumezana Hansi, met with her early January. It was around the first week of January, the 6th, and we said to her, we cannot go ahead with this. This client proposal is exactly the same as Seacrest, which we had rejected, and therefore we recommend again that we start from a clean slate and we do a new RFP completely. Her words to us were, leave it with me, I will handle it. I'll speak to the board and I'll speak to FTC. We left everything with her. That was in January. Come February, March, we were, as Treasury and as SAA, we go into our financial year end. So we were busy with our financial year end, with our external auditors and various other work that we needed to do. By March, I find out that our acting interim CFO, Phumezana Hansi, had gone via procurement to request that we get a transaction advisor. When I was asked to sign the approval for this transaction advisor, and the decision was, the reasons were that this transaction advisor would be chosen to review our existing portfolio, loans portfolio. And I challenged that, and I said, why would we do that when our client, when we're already doing it as Treasury? Part of the other work the transaction advisor was supposed to do is to look at our leases on the aircraft, which our fleet department already looks at. And the third other activity they were supposed to do was look at our balance sheet and see if they could recommend restructuring our balance sheet, which has been done time and time again by our accounting department, as well as our external and internal auditors, saying your balance sheet needs to be restructured because it had a high debt to equity ratio and that it was very skewed to more debt than any assets on it. And yeah, so that was in a nutshell what the transaction advisor's role was supposed to do. The procurement department put this out on tender. They put it out first as a RFI, and then there were 6 respondents to this. This was done all in the procurement department. It didn't touch our side as Treasury or the accounts department. And a client was chosen by the name of BNP Capital. This client was chosen being that their fee was the lowest at 2.68 million, that they could do this work, and B, that they passed the 100% or the criteria for being a totally BE organization. I was told about this, and then they wanted to, this client was chosen, and they were supposed to review the loan portfolio. I'm expecting this client to set up a meeting with me. I'm not seeing anything about this client and thinking, what's going on? We need to know about this. But early May, in April, we then set up a meeting with PMESA. All the time we try to set up a meeting to say, what is going on with the FTC deal? Can we get the funding going? All we've been doing to date is rolling over our debt. We are not getting anywhere. We're going to hit a wall in June and August because we had some debt that were maturing, and we wanted to finalize our debt book by then. Our acting CFO then said to us, look, she's been working on it, and she's not getting, she's making slow progress, but she said the easiest way for us now is we've already got this client called BNP Capital that won the tender as a transaction advisor to review our loan book and to leases and restructure our balance sheet. So we can use them, change their scope, and then they can become our, they can source funding for us. Immediately in this meeting was, again, all the financial risk management heads there. And we all said, no, this cannot be. We cannot just change the scope of the initial tender, because in our policies, it says it shouldn't be more than 15% of initial fees. And secondly, we said, the scope is totally different. So we need to go out on a new RFP. And again, I recommended, you know what, we need to just start from a clean slate. Let us go out and put out the RFP. However, Ms. Nahansi said to us, no, leave it with me. She's going, we must give her a week. We gave her that week. Unknown to us is that she had gone ahead to board to seek board's approval for that. And board gave approval. They gave approval. I was then called in on the 6th of May to PMESA's office. And she said to me, Cynthia, you're always challenging me. You're always asking questions. So I'm calling you here alone so we can have a discussion. And she stated, I've been to board. I told them that we're not getting any headway with FTC, and that we already have a client here on our books that we've taken as a transaction advisor, and that this client, we could now get them to source funds. I said to her, I don't think that's a process we should have followed, PMESA. And she said, no, the work's already done. I've already taken it to procurement. All you need to do is sign this document. And she pushes this document in front of me.
It looks like Cynthia's connection has dropped again. Cynthia, are you still with us? I'm just going to stop her video. I think it's going to be better. Cynthia, if you can unmute your mic again, and if you can hear me, I think I'm going to ask you to, can we put your video off, Cynthia? Because I think the connection is not great. We keep losing you. Okay, and if you can unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Should I move to the next slide as well, or are you happy to stay here?
Yes, you can move to the next slide. They can read in the meantime while I'm talking. This is just a quote that I wanted in front of everyone. So thank you, and sorry that it's just thrown us out. And then I was asked to sign this, which I refused. And with that was when I said to her, please, the banks can do this at a cheaper rate. In the document, it stated that we will use BNP Capital and to source 300 million, to source 15 billion. And the initial fee was roughly first about a full 2%, 3% was the first fee. She reduced it then to 2%, which equated to 300 million, excluding VAT. Now, 300 million was in my balance scorecard to save for SAA. And I then said, no, I am not signing this document and I don't recommend it. And I feel that we need to go ahead and start a complete new RFP. Alternatively, we can just go to the banks, put it out to the banks only, and ask the banks what fee would they quote SAA. Ms. Nahansi said to me, you know what, Cynthia, let's leave it. We'll take it up later. And I told next week, and she said, can you meet with me on Monday? And I said, well, unfortunately, I've already booked for leave. I'll be away on a pilgrimage. And can we wait for a week? I'm only going for a week. She said yes then, and she wanted to know who will deputize for me. And I said that my Michael Klein, who was my deputy, would be deputizing for me. I flew out that night. In the middle of that week, I was told by my deputy that he had signed this document. And immediately I realized, you know what do I do now? And I took some time out just to write a WhatsApp message to National Treasury. And that was the first where I said, this is a whistleblowing WhatsApp message. I need you to know that this is going down, that a client that was chosen to do work has just reviewed our portfolio, as now the scope has changed for this client now to source funding at a fee of, they changed the fee further to 1.5%, which equated to 225 million. If you added VAT to that, it was 256 million. And then that was where my whistleblowing effort came in. With that, upon my return, I was still so confident that I could stop the deal. I contacted Pumeza. She would not allow me any meetings. I then wrote her an email saying I'm going to contact the banks and get some hypothetical quotes from them, which I did. I got the hypothetical quotes. They were far lower than the amounts. The minimum was around 25 million. The maximum was around 85 million. And I sent these to her saying, look, this is what the banks are quoting. This is what BNP Capital is quoting. And I said, there's no way we should be doing this. I still got no response. I sent another follow-up email stating that we, and I included myself, I said, this would be unethical of us if we went ahead with this deal. And then only she responded, her question to me is, are you calling the board unethical? And I said to her, all of us, because I'm in this as well. And I said, I'm not comfortable and I don't want this to go ahead. And hence I'm using the word unethical again, because I said, we're not following process. We're not following our own procedures and our own policies within our organization. And I do not want to be part of it. She then said, well, call a meeting set up a meeting. The date I got was only 31st of May. I knew there was a board meeting coming up and I thought, you know what, I will attend the board meeting and see if I can make a presentation at board. When I asked the company secretary when the board meeting was going to happen and if I could attend, and she wanted to know what it was about, I said to her that it's about the funding for this 15 billion consolidation of debt. And then she said to me, well, it's already been approved. This deal was approved by a round robin by the board members. So you can imagine how I felt then. What do I do now? What recourse do I have? And I immediately then thought, let me contact National Treasury. In fact, I first contacted internal executives. So I'd already spoken to the CFO telling her I'm against this. I don't think we should be doing it. And I gave her a solution that we should rather throw out the RFP and start the process again. I then went to speak to 2 other executives and asked their opinion. What do I do? How do I go about this? They were also equally concerned and said, you know, you need to contact National Treasury, Public Protector, and another executive said outer. So I did that. I did a full compilation of data, evidence, and a formal letter of whistleblowing to National Treasury. I did it for the public protector, but via email, and I didn't. And I did it again. Then I did it to Outer, where I put all the information onto a flash disk. The result was that I got suspended. And the result was that I got suspended from SAA because word had leaked out, obviously. And with the leaking of the information, I then met with Outer, and they put me in touch with Weber Wenzel. And with Weber Wenzel, I asked them, can we still interdict this deal before SAA pays it to BNP Capital? And they worked with me from the 6th of July. They then wrote to SAA to say, kindly stop this deal. We have evidence that this deal has not run through your own policies. It hasn't followed your procedures, and hence it needs to be stopped. SAA ignored this letter of demand, and we then had to do a formal interdict where we went to the High Court and we stopped it. So on the 21st of July, SAA made this announcement that they've now stopped the deal. Once they made that announcement, they put out a media article stating that Cynthia did not whistleblow, that she committed misconduct, and that her misconduct has nothing to do with the whistleblowing. So obviously, only by the end of July did they give me my charges. And my charges were, I didn't whistleblow, I committed misconduct, I didn't follow the internal whistleblowing procedures, that I went to the media. So it was a whole lot of other things other than whistleblowing. So I had no protection regarding the Protected Disclosures Act. And then I needed to rather defend myself from a labor relations perspective. And so that was where my role ended, as how do I now get back on track for myself. Here am I now in court cases. They set up a disciplinary hearing, got there, SAA was not even available. I was there with my lawyers. SAA's lawyers came, but no representative of SAA. Obviously, it couldn't go ahead. My lawyer then suggested, you know what, let's take this to the Labour Court, which we did. SAA's lawyers were there. They fought it to go back to the CCMA. We had to go back to CCMA. CCMA, each month we went on and on. SAA was never available, although their lawyers were there. And in the end, my lawyer suggested, this went from 2016 into 2017, that Cynthia, you're 59, in 6 months' time, you're going to be 60 years old. Let's see if we can just recommend early retirement. And that's what we put forward. And that's how I eventually left SAA through early retirement. I'd like to pause there because then the next couple of years, so that was 2017. In 2018, I worked with the investigators of the Zondo Commission. And then I had to give presentation at the Zondo Commission. And so I'd like to just pause there, and we'll play a few clips which will allow you to ask some questions, and then I'll go into conclusion, and then we leave it for Q&A. So Vikeshni, I'm going to mute myself and stop my video. And great, then if you don't mind just taking it through the 3 clips, they're a couple of minutes each.
And former SAA head of financial risk management, Cynthia Stimpel, told the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture that she was suspended for fighting potential corruption.
Stimpel said she had openly opposed a decision to source funding through consulting firms. This has meant that the state-owned airline would have had to pay more to consolidate its debt, already at 15 billion rand.
Former SAA employee Cynthia Stimpel said she knew her job would be on the line if she blew the whistle on irregularities at SAA. She told the commission that she was against a board decision to appoint BNP Capital to provide transaction advisory services and source funding. Stimpel said she was concerned that the airline was deviating from regular processes. This as the use of transaction advisors was not only flawed but also came at a hefty price of 225 million rand. Stimpel was also concerned that SAA would be liable to pay a 50% cancellation fee, which amounted to 49.9 million rand.
The fact that Treasury Department was not involved in this made me feel totally uncomfortable, and I felt that I needed to do something about it. Yes, I did talk to two of my colleagues, Michael Klein and Silas Mtsazi, at the time, and said to them, you know that this process was not done correctly. Can we stand together and speak up about it? And they both said no, they need their jobs. They're not going to do anything.
Her bid to get hold of BNP documents she should have had access to led to a suspension. A colleague told her she was not privy to the crucial documents and informed her that he would report her. Stimpel was subsequently suspended for misconduct and for being in possession of confidential documents.
Ms. Nahansi, in front of her, had a letter, and she pushed it across to me, and she said, this is your suspension letter. And I said to her, I thought we were going to discuss what happened, why I took the documents, can I explain my side of the story, why I needed to see the documents. And she said, don't explain anything to me, you've been suspended, sign the letter. And I said to her, do I have any legal recourse? And she said, oh, you can go to the CCMA and you need to find your own legal representative at your own cost.
The hearings continue. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Good. Thank you.
The former Chief Financial Officer, Phumezan Hansi, testified that the board appointed transaction advisors because SAA lacked the necessary skills internally. Hansi told the commission that advisors were meant to review SAA's loan book and advise the board. At the time, SAA was looking to get a 15 billion rand loan to consolidate its debt. However, the use of advisors would have cost the airline an additional amount of over 200 million rand. BNP Capital was appointed in 2015 to advise the SOE, but its mandate was changed later to include sourcing funding.
The board has got a right as well to feel, if they feel that there's no expertise for this transaction internally, they do have a right to source it externally.
Yes, I guess the point is if they feel, well, it would be a justified decision if, as a matter of fact, those expertise were lacking within SAA. Is that not correct?
Yes, it would be justified.
If they were available internally, then the decision to go externally would not be justified.
It would not be justified.
And Hansi testified that the board made a resolution to get funding from the Free State Development Corporation. She says it seemed like a cheaper option with lower interest rates. This after the board declined a bid from Seacrest and the option of getting funding from a consortium of banks.
In terms of the delegation of authority, this transaction is the board's decision, because I knew that any transaction that is above 50 million rands, the board needs to take a decision. So when they took a decision in declining the Seacrest and the consortium of the banks and taking a decision of us engaging with FDC, I thought at the time the board, I didn't have any reason to believe that there's anything untoward.
The deal did not go through after National Treasury informed SAA that the FDC was not mandated to fund SOEs. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
I think you might be confusing it. You see, because what happens is you go to America, you get wined and dined by AAR, you come back, and the board decides to retract that tender That tender in respect of which there were other competitors who might have been service providers to SAA Technical, and you decide to embark on the MOU with AAR. So your closeness with AAR led to a retraction of a tender in respect of which there were competitors to now form a partnership with AAR. Do you not regard that as problematic either?
Chair, it's not problematic at all.
Right. And if other competitors thought that the fact that you were in the US and being wined and dined by one of the bidders led you to cutting them out of potential supply to SAA Technical and forging a partnership with the entity that had wined and dined you, they wouldn't have any complaints of unfairness. Is that your approach?
I don't know, Chair.
Okay.
You don't know what your approach is?
I don't know if they would complain or not.
No, I'm asking whether if they complained, they would legitimately do so.
That would depend, Chair. That would be proved in the court of law as it has happened with AAR and Air France, whether it is legitimate or not.
We'll come back to the
And
litigation.
if you don't get to a court of law,
Yes,
it's fine.
Chair,
If you don't get to a court of law, it's not a problem.
it's not fine, Chair, but as SAA Technical at the time, we consider that was the best decision that we did. And in fact, as I am still sitting
Which
here,
decision now?
the decision to form a partnership with AAR, because the process, the partnership process, was embarked into, and it was agreed that we needed to form a partnership, hence the birth of the MOU.
Did you get persuaded while you were overseas at being wined and dined by AAR that the way to go would be to retract the tender and enter into an MOU with AAR? Is it something you got persuaded of when you were overseas? Or when you came back?
I cannot be persuaded by whining and dining of AAR, Chair, because
But at what
I would
point
be in a
did you-
position to wine and dine myself if I wanted to.
At what point did you see this point that the right way to go would be to retract the tender and enter into an MOU with AAR? Was it while you were visiting AAR overseas, or was it after you had returned?
Of course, the MOU, I don't know the date, but I would think the MOU would be entered after we have been there and seen the premises and seen what value can they add to SAA Technical.
So what you saw on the trip would have influenced you to say we must go the MOU route?
Yes, Chair.
So which means it was while you were overseas on this trip that you got persuaded that you must go the MOU route?
We did not get persuaded, Chair. The purpose of our trip was to make sure that we confirm the resources that they said they had in the paper, which we liked, that this is the company that we can form a partnership with. So basically, our trip there was to make sure to confirm what was in the paper. It was not for them to persuade us. We acted in the best interest of SAA Technical to enter into that MOU, which expired after 6 months after all.
I'll let Ms. Hofmeyer ask her next question, but before that, I want to go back to the question of communication with a bidder while a tender is open. The basis on which you have now, today, said there would have been nothing wrong for you to go on this trip, even if you were aware that AAR was one of the bidders on the tender that was still open, is that the company, that is SAA Technical, had a rigorous procurement process. So, as I understand it, you were not going to be influenced by anything because there is a rigorous procurement process. I don't remember you advancing that as the reason yesterday for saying communication between a decision maker could take place. Communication could take place between a decision maker in regard to a tender and a director of a company that has put in a bid. I thought you advanced a different basis. Am I right? Am I right in understanding that?
I may not have remembered, Chair, what basis did I advance. However, I remember me saying that there are processes including combined assurance providers, and I mentioned internal audit, external audit, risk management, and management as a whole, which basically would also form part of the chain within the procurement process.
I seem to think that at least at one stage, the basis you advanced was that as long as the communication did not include discussing the tender, there would be nothing wrong with the decision maker having communication or even having dinner or lunch with the director of a company that had put in a bid in regard to a tender that was still open. At least that was either the basis you advanced or one of them. Is that your recollection as well?
Yes, Chair. And in addition to that, there are these rigorous processes that I told you about today.
Good, thank you. I'm sure you've all watched that, and it's close to ending time. And my conclusion is that, so I gave evidence at the Zondo Commission, and so did many others. And my evidence, together with the executives of SAA, those that were suspended during the time of Ms. Mayeni as the board chairperson, we then put forward, together with AUTA, a recommendation for Ms. Mayeni to become a delinquent director, which all happened towards the end of 2019 into last year. And last year, June, she was declared delinquent director. So I just leave you with this from Zapiro, where he had done this beautiful cartoon saying that I came in like a wrecking ball for SAA, obviously, and the economy. And yeah, so that was basically the story, and that's what's in the book. So I'd like to ask you, if we still have time, we could do another poll. Maybe you want to take that on the around the whistleblowing one, and leave the SAA one out, Ivakeshni?
Sure, everyone should see the whistleblowing question on their screens now. Would you blow the whistle if you observed or knew about wrongdoing, fraud, or corruption? So I'll give that a few seconds. There's lots of comments in the chat group. Some of them have just been to the hosts and panelists, some are to everyone. A lot of them commenting on how courageous you've been, Cynthia. I also see, I think we've got one or two members that are from or were from SAA as well during the times that have commented about. There was Eric and another individual that just looking for the message. I don't know if Eric wants to speak or share any of his views that he shared to us. Unfortunately, you posted that only to the panelists and not to everyone, Eric. So I don't know if you wanted to share that with everyone. If anyone would like to share any of their stories, I'm going to end the poll in the meantime and share the results. So 96% have said yes, 4% no. I think, Cynthia, we had said whoever did say yes, if the first two people to raise their hand or maybe want to share their story, we have a surprise for you. So if there is anyone that would like to share, do please raise your hand now and I will unmute you. I do see I've got Thokozani that had her or him hand up already. So I will unmute you soon. I'm just getting a chance to look through some of the comments because unfortunately when the video was playing, I couldn't move my mouse. Okay, so I see Amanda put a hand up when we asked the question. So I'm just gonna go first to Thokozani. If you can unmute your mic. I don't know if you had a question or a comment. Okay, Amanda, also if you can unmute. There we go, Amanda.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Amanda.
Welcome, Amanda.
I think more than a question, first of all, let me thank Cynthia for coming on board and share this as a story with us and the trouble that whistleblowers within the government and SOE sector go through. My comment is that I work for a government sector, of course, a public service, and these things are a daily bread. That's the reality, whether we like it or not. But the issue is that if you do not have people in the corporate services, what we deem corporate services, your supply chain people, your finance people, your risk people, who has the actual documentation of these things, if you don't have those people willing to share what they are working with, which is unethical and illegal and so on, it's difficult when you are in a line core business or line space, line function, where you can whistleblow these things, because when you are whistleblowing, you must have the documentary evidence, which most of the time people that are online that can see these things. You see that something is amiss here. There is corruption that is going on, there's fraud that is going on, but you are missing the documentary evidence because it's sitting with other people. So you can't do anything about that because it's just your word, but nothing that tangible that you can get, because the people that are sitting with it are very also scared. That's the comment that I want to make. The second thing, when you take the journey of whistleblowing, it is a very lonely journey and it is a very risky journey, not only to you as an individual, but to the whole family. I am not sure whether people are aware that these people are operating in syndicates, and part of their syndicates are killers, really killers. We call it in the Zulu or in the Xhosa word ingabi. They have this group of people that are trigger happy, that are able to be bought with big monies, the monies that they steal from the sectors, and kill you and your family and everybody else. I think Cynthia and the guy that they used to be together at SAA, they were lucky that they were not killed, no family was killed, but they lost everything, whatever that they lost in terms of family and maybe assets, say here and whatever that else they lost, but they still had their life to even tell the story and to even share with us now as people and listen to these things. But there is killing. I can tell you without even confusing myself, there is 2 levels of killing. If they don't kill you physically and get someone to come and shoot you, they would use muti to destroy and kill you. So if you are not an African, I don't know, in the whites and the colors and Indians and English, but if you are not a Black African, you would not understand. But it's 2 levels that they are doing that. If they are not going to go and get their killers to kill you, they are going to use the mutu to kill you. Their aim is to eliminate you and eliminate your evidence. So those are the tricky things that are around these things of whistleblowing. You get subjected to such eventualities. Now the question is, how do you protect the whistleblowers from both ends? And you must remember, the people that would see these things happening. They are still young. They don't have money to pay the lawyers' fees and everything. And everybody is connected. Everybody is connected. Even if you get the lawyer, you don't even know this lawyer, whether this lawyer is really with you or this lawyer is just with you to synphon because he is in the payroll of these people. So it's just a complicated world. It's just a complicated world. And the question that I have, because I've seen where I am as an accounting authority member, that the role of EXCO, it's mimicking a role of being part of the day-to-day operation, and you find that what the EXCO are privy to certain information of day-to-day that the rest of the members are not, and there are certain decisions that are taken between EXCO and the executives. Do you understand? So that role of EXCO in boards, I don't know in the SOE boards or in the private sector how it manifests itself, but in the sector that I am, I'm beginning to see this role as an extension of executives, and you'll find that there is a very tight relation, which I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it borders around that they do these things are done together, and by the time they come to the rest of the people, you see that you are against a certain solid tide already, and now the executive can see that, okay, that committee is problematic for us to do this thing. We will need to go to this committee that will not be problematic for us to do this thing. And you'll find that certain things now are being moved and channeled to the committee that they feel comfortable to work with, the committee that does the questioning, the this and that deemed to be difficult to them, it's being eliminated. And the other thing, it's the selection of members of boards to committees, because in our sector, the funniest thing that is happening, which IODS maybe should look into it, is the fact that your CEO is the one that sits and decides who will sit in a certain committee and who will sit in a certain committee. And by so doing, it allows him or her to manipulate, to say that, okay, these ones are problematic, and where we need certain decision that will go flow smoothly, these ones mustn't sit in that committee. And all those manipulation of who sits where and so on, besides the fact that you need to sit in terms of your skill and in terms of your expertise that you are bringing in this board or in this accounting authority, but there are also those maneuvers that are taking place. That's my comment and question. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thokozani, Cynthia, I don't know if you want to respond to Amanda first, and then Thokozani, if you want to go ahead after that. Cynthia, are you still with us? Okay, I think we'll just give 2 seconds to Cynthia. Thokozani, if you in the meantime, do you want to ask your question?
Hello? Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead. Cynthia, are you back with us? I'm just going to, okay, we've lost Cynthia. She should be back with us in the meantime. I'm just gonna give her a few seconds. I'll run her second poll that she had. Sorry, that was still sharing. Let me stop that. She did have another poll around SAA, so I'll share that in the meantime while we wait for her to come back on. You'll see that in front of you. It was around, do you believe that SAA should have been given 10 billion and be resurrected as a new SAA? Would it benefit South Africa? Okay, I'm going to give it a few more seconds. All right, I'm going to stop this poll. It looks like most of us have answered. I'm going to share the results. Majority, 80% say no, 20% say yes. I'll share that result with Cynthia when she comes back. I do apologize. I think her connection has not been good. Okay, here we go. Hi, Cynthia, if you can unmute, please.
Thank you so much. What I'd like to say to Amanda, please contact me. Please get my details from Vakeshni. I have, in this time, I've started an organization called Citizens of Conscience with the main reason to support staff, whistleblowers. The second thing is I've built up a network of lawyers and a network of psychologists, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, social workers, because that is what you need. And so please get my details. I am willing, anyone who's on this, who feels that they're in the situation of, they've already whistleblown, I see someone mentioned that they've already 9 months suspended, please contact me. The only way we can do it and save South Africa is that we work together, and I'm willing to do that. And I spent the last year since mine is how do I help whistleblowers? Because I realized there was no platform, there was nowhere I could go to someone to discuss or find ways. The legal fees are extremely expensive. We've now set up some lawyers who are willing to do it pro bono, and we're building on that. So please, I'm get my details and I will find a way to help you all. Thank you.
I've just posted in the chat Cynthia's email and cell number that you can get in touch with her via. We are running a bit over, so if those are still fine to stay on. I've also got Louisa that's also got a hand raised. So just to go back to you, Thokozani, I saw you've put a comment in the chat. Do you want to say it out loud, or do you have a question? Okay, I'm going to allow Louisa in the meantime to unmute and ask your question.
Thanks, Vakeshni. It's more of a comment. Firstly, I'd like to commend Cynthia on her efforts. And I also wanted to respond to a comment that Amanda made about, the legal fees to fight a situation like this being exorbitant. I've also been in a similar situation, and what I've seen is that, because a lot of executives find themselves in a situation where they're dependent on their salary, is unethical, is happening, within, the scope of their work, they find it very difficult, to actually take action and to report on these things. And what I found, had been very helpful is, also making sure that one has legal cover necessary, to be able to support one, through the process. And certainly, an initiative that Cynthia has started, to actually put together, attorneys who are willing, to work pro bono is very, very helpful. But I think another thing, that is also very helpful is that in situations like this, you find that organizations, that have, these sort of deals happen, they have a pattern of executives, who seemingly leave the organization, quietly. And it's usually individuals who have uncovered, unethical practices. And, when they raise, their hand and speak up about these things, they're rushed out of the organizations and, settled to leave organizations. It's important to have a network, with your colleagues, people who are facing similar challenges, because often it's not just you who's facing the challenge, other colleagues have been through the same process, and as one does their job, it's important to have proper, accurate record keeping, and have a record of every decision that you make, so that you can back up any questions, whenever there are questions that are raised about transactions that have been approved under your oversight.
Exactly. Thanks, Louisa.
Cynthia, I've got two people that have commented on the side about them being whistleblowers. We've got Caroline and Intombi. So do you want to share the good news with them?
Thank you, Caroline and Intombi. I would like to gift you my book. So I will, if you can give your details to Vakeshni and she can pass it on to me, I'll get it couriered to you. So thank you for your bravery, for standing up and speaking out. And for that, I'd like to give you my book as a gift. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. We've got their details already, so Cindy will send that to you. And then I'm just also going to put in the chat group as well, just for anyone else who would like an autographed copy of your book. There's the details again where they can contact you, and they can also get it off Exclusive Books and all the other various book outlets. Just quickly, I know we're over time, but there are just a few questions around there's a few questions in our Q&A, and I thought maybe let's just try and see if we can answer some of them. I see you've already ticked that you'd like to answer Nandla's question.
Can you ask the question? I think I've been answering them as I see them. Maybe they're there in the answer.
Have you been? Okay, I see.
Nanda's,
Yes,
is what is required for the nomination and selection process of governing members and boards on public sector boards to be reviewed to avoid public. She's saying what is required. Now, I agree totally, because right now, your ministerial governing bodies are the ones that select the boards, and what needs to happen is that there should be no political influence. And I totally agree with you. And it's something we need to bring out strongly. This can be brought out from the Institute of Directors on the one side, Vakeshni, if you can take that up. And it's something I will take up from a citizens of conscience perspective, that this has to be incorporated with any board selection. And I agree totally. Thank you, Nanda, for that.
Thank you. There is a DPSA guide around the appointment of board members and CEOs, which I know we commented on a couple of years ago, and I'm not quite sure. I don't think it's actually been approved yet, or it has been approved, but we haven't seen it actually come out as yet. So there was something that was in place to try and deal with that, which we gave some comments and recommendations on. So Cynthia, Lunga had a question around, you only mentioned the CFO. Is there a reason why you did not engage with the CEO before trying the board?
Okay, so the CEO, that would have been the process, right? So you go your next level. So the acting CEO was working together with the CFO. And for me, it was, there was no way I could report this to him because they're in cahoots. I was in a National Treasury meeting whereby he stated that he's not going to, they were asking why haven't we reached the stage where we were. There was we have the shareholders compact and we have a list of things we needed to achieve. And he point back, said it was never discussed with him, yet I know he's been in all the meetings. So when I said, but you cannot say this, you know, I was called in to say that I shouldn't challenge him. You know, he was pushing back all the time on anything that National Treasury had advised SAA to do. And National Treasury had taken over the management of SAA from DPE at the time, and they kept a close call on us because they wanted to make sure that we didn't go against our policies. And yeah, the acting CEO was brought in by Dudu Mayeni, Musa Twane, working together with Pumezana Hansi, and that was my primary reason for not going to him. Thanks.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think we've touched already on the questions from Dawn, but maybe just to recap in case anything was left out. She had two. What kind of support did you receive from the organizations who fight corruption? And secondly, what advice do you have for others who find themselves faced with this challenge? I think you did mention already the organization you have in place. And I don't know if you can maybe just put in the chat group just the details of that organization so everyone has it. And I don't know if you want to share anything more on the support that you received during your fight.
Thanks, Vakeshni. I will. I was fortunate when I whistleblew at the time was through Outer, so I didn't get any feedback from Corruption Watch. They picked up my message much later and then came back to apologize. Public Protector didn't come back to me at all, and I think it got lost in the bigger scheme of things at the time, because I know that Ms. Madenzela was on her way out at the time. She was in that period, and she was looking at the state capture issue. So with Outer, they supported me in paying my legal fees, and that I have eternal gratitude, because I really didn't know how I would do it. Although before I whistleblew, I did tell my family. Some lady mentioned, I think it was Amanda that said the impact on family. It is crucial. There is definitely impact on your family, on your spouse, on your children, on your siblings, or anyone else in your sphere, of influence, even in your church groups. And I was fortunate that Outer said that they would pick up my legal bill, which they did. However, I could not get a work at all. Someone asked in one of the questions, what am I doing now? Am I employed? No, I applied to the banks because that's where my background is in banking. Not a single bank came back to me. I applied to universities thinking, well, I'll take a research job because I have an MBA. I will maybe take a junior lecture job in business, and I put various options for them. I was even prepared to do filing, and I didn't even get acknowledgement. Sorry, you're either too qualified or we don't have capacity. Nothing. So it is hard. I've started a group of support for whistleblowers. Everyone has suffered the same detriments. So detriment to your occupation, your current occupation, and nothing for your future occupation, no matter what you try to work on. And then there's impact on your own personal health, your mental health. There's impact on your family. One lady in my group had gone through a divorce, and her husband wanted to take away her daughter because he felt she was an unfit mother while she was going through a depression. So there was no understanding. And hence, from all these stories is why I felt we need to do something for ourselves. There isn't a whistleblowing platform. The Protected Disclosures Act does not protect us. So I did some research, what is happening in the US, what's happening in the UK, in New Zealand, Australia, the rest of Europe, and I've compiled information, and that's how I started the organization. What can we do as South Africans and start something that supports South Africans, because we're unique. And as I think it was Amanda too, talking about the two sides, that they could kill you physically through guns and damage to your body, etc., but they could kill you in another way, as she mentioned, through muti. And I think that's very valid. I didn't understand it years ago. I would have dismissed it. But now I understand it through speaking to people. And so thank you again, Amanda, for raising that, because now you've brought it to the fore again, that there is need for this. And it's something I haven't incorporated in the company yet, but now I'll have to start thinking around that. And just in conclusion is that, yes, I'm in a better space because I had the support of my family. I also have my own internal belief system and principles that I follow, and my faith in God. We all have our different gods that we believe in, and I think whatever you believe in, keep that, because that is your stronghold. And then my other pillar for me personally was, because I do yoga, and it kept me physically strong, but it also kept me mentally strong. It's not often for all of us. And one of the areas I'm working on is how to help whistleblowers keep their physical strength up, because that is a proponent to keeping your mental strength. And yeah, so please get all my details. I see it's on the page there. Any questions you still need, I'm willing to help. Where I cannot help, I will recommend you to people. I've spent the last year specifically finding people willing to help whistleblowers, because it is hard. It is a lonely journey, and you're literally on your own when you're trying to stand up for what is good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for your time this morning. And thanks to all our members who continue to stay on. I think it was so interesting, that we couldn't end it at 9 o'clock. And I'm sure you still have so much more to share, Cynthia. So we look forward to having you again. I know you do some other individual director development programs for us. So members can also attend that session for a bit more in-depth conversation. But you've got Cynthia's details on your screen. You can contact her on LinkedIn and her email there as well. And the organization she mentioned, Citizens of Conscience, is also there on the right-hand side. So thank you, Cynthia, and thank you to our members staying on. Invaluable discussion. I hope it's inspired everyone here to stand up and speak up and have the courage that you did. So we'll see everyone again next month for our next session. And Cynthia, thank you once again.
Thanks, Keshni. There is a question from Conblich now. If you can send it separately to me and I can respond. All right. I know we need to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.